Hello and welcome to this episode of the Digital Disruption Podcast. Today's guest is Sucheet Amin, my good friend, and he's the founder and CEO of inCase. inCase is a revolutionary, award-winning mobile app platform for law firms looking to enhance their communication with clients. Such, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
You too, Chris. Thanks very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. But we'll dive straight into this. The theme I wanted to explore with your good self is disruption around the legal space and adoption of the technology within it. And for those of you, the listeners and people watching this that don't know you, do you want to just tell us a bit about your journey from being a lawyer to a tech entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a lawyer. I'm a qualified solicitor by trade, and I set up my law firm, which is still going, just at the start of the last recession, late 2009, and when I took that leap to start out on my own, I really had two key focus areas. I very much believed at the time, and I'm glad to say that belief has become a reality, that if I focused in on clients and my people, the rest would actually take care of itself. But I knew very early on that if I took care of my people, I guess as best I could, they would take care of my clients, and then my clients would then take care of the firm. And it was a very symbiotic relationship that would be forged. And as I said, that's kind of how I always approach things, and that certainly has turned out to be the case. I think in the early years, what I started to realize was that the relationship between lawyers and clients was starting to evolve. I very much remember when I was training, and in the early years of my career, that there was this relationship between me as a solicitor and my clients, a wrong relationship, really, that I as a solicitor had the controlling power in the relationship. I was the person that I guess made all the judgment calls and decisions. But of course, that's fundamentally wrong. It's my clients that appointed me. It's my clients that actually tell me what to do, sure, on advice. And ultimately, it's my clients that could fire me. Thankfully, that never happened. But they have all the power, always have done. But there was, for whatever reason, I guess, over time, there's been this belief that the lawyer has total control. And what I started to notice back in certainly 2010 onwards was that my clients were starting to recognize that they had more say in the relationship, and they were wanting to be heard, quite rightly, really. And what I started to see was a curiosity from my clients to want to be more involved in the matter which I was helping them to resolve, wanting to understand more about the process or the part of the transaction they're at that stage, perhaps even beyond that, what might come later down the line. And that was all very valuable, very important for my clients. But I had to adjust my approach to being a solicitor, because this was all very new. This wasn't a relationship which I had become used to with my clients. And it all came to a head, and I remember it literally like it was yesterday. Over 10 years ago now, nearing the end of 2011, when we were in one of our early office spaces, nice big open space, no internal walls. I was definitely in amongst the troops, which were some great times. And I remember one by one, everyone taking a call from a client. And as I started to earwig and stop what I was doing, it became clear from what I could tell that the clients were asking for answers relating to something which was not unimportant, but not necessarily relevant at that point in time in their own individual case. So it would be either a general update call or what's going to happen next. There were incoming calls, again, requests for information, which totally reasonable, but not something we'd seen before. And as I looked at my computer screen just to check, my instinct actually thought we might be behind with our overall capacity, our overall workload. Were we behind because we weren't on the front foot? There were too many incoming calls. And actually, as I looked at my screen and the data, that didn't seem to be the case. There was nothing there that was out of the ordinary from what we'd been doing before. So I waited till the phones all went down, and there were, as I said, great days when we used to literally scrum round and people would say, come over, and they'd wheel their chairs over or come and perch on the end of somebody's desk nearby. And I asked quite a brave question, really, which was, guys, are we behind with our work? Because I've just noticed everyone taking a call from a client asking for some sort of an update. And the information behind my computer here says that we're not, but what's going on? Initially there was silence. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to openly admit that they're behind with their work, certainly not publicly. But one brave colleague did pipe up, and he said, can't remember exact words, but he said something like, I don't know where everybody else is, but I'm certainly not behind with my work. But I have noticed clients asking more than usual, calling in more often or emailing in more often. And then there was naturally a flutter of nodding heads through the group, and everyone seemed to kind of back this person's claim at the time. So we dug into a little bit, and then I let everyone get back to their work. And I thought that there must be something here, because that was quite an unusual event. And we were about to embark on some client research. The firm had been going 2 years now, so we had some good, strong relationships with some clients, and over a period of time. And I thought, well, let's try and let's just pivot this bit of client research to be more specific around what do our clients need from us in terms of the relationship. So we know what they need from us in terms of our skills as a lawyer. They need us to help resolve their problems, and we know how we do that. But beyond all of that, what did they need from us? So what did they want out of this relationship? And as I started to gather this intelligence and this research came back, I identified 4 key areas, which I believe is still very true today. And in time, I've come to believe that these 4 key areas are not specific to the legal space. I think they transcend across a number of sectors and industries, particularly service-based industries. But at the time, I didn't know that. I was very focused in on my business and my business alone. And these 4 key areas were broadly speed, information, education, and technology. And I'll just quickly touch on each one. Speed, pretty obvious. Clients, if you're engaging a lawyer, doing so because you want to. You're doing so because you either need to or you have to. It's what I call a distress purchase. In that environment, somebody requiring a lawyer wants to get through that relationship as fast as possible. And that's not an unreasonable expectation by any stretch of the imagination. The second one, which was information. So my clients were saying to me and my people, look, you get us some information, but we don't necessarily understand what you're telling us. That's why we have to pick up the phone and ask you to explain it to us, almost face to face. And when we do get it, there's language that's used that's sometimes too technical, and so we can't join the dots, and it's a lot easier to pick up the phone. So there was a knowledge transfer gap between us and them. So there was something there around the information we were sharing. The third one, which was a new one for me, was this piece that I labeled education. So our clients were saying, look, while I'm having a relationship with you, I want to be educated along the way. I want to understand what's going on throughout the process. I want to have a deeper relationship with you, so I can effectively be a good client, make the right choices. And that was a shift. And again, in hindsight, that was being driven by the likes of Amazon and others that were starting now to shape the way that our clients or consumers were just consuming any product or service, which was effectively they were being driven they were being told regular updates, or they were being informed about what might happen next. And again, at the time, I didn't appreciate this, but it's a lot easier to see now that what that was doing, it was laying in foundations into my clients' minds that, look, if I can get this kind of information over here, why can't I get it with you as my law firm, my lawyer? There was no disconnect between the two. It was just like, I've got a product and a service I'm engaging with or purchasing or experiencing over here, and I'm used to that and I like that, so I want that with you. Which again, totally reasonable if you kind of look at it objectively. And then the fourth one, which actually was a real surprise to me, was this technology piece. And in a nutshell, there was quite a lot to it. But in a nutshell, my clients were saying, look, you're not using enough technology, but they in delivering my service. But we couldn't get any deeper than that. They couldn't share what or how. So, and again, hindsight has played a part in my understanding around this now. But at the time, the reason why I was really shocked by this is the firm is only 2 years old. It is actually using all the latest bits of technology that it could use to help manage my clients' matters. But the difference is we were using the technology inside of the safety or within our business. So they were all internal systems. And again, as a distressed purchase, not many times do I have a client coming back to me. So it's a one-off purchase. So they've got nothing to compare against. So the experience they're going through with me and my firm is the first and probably only time they're only ever going to do that. So they've got nothing to judge against. And all they are then saying to me at that moment in time was, you're not using enough technology compared to what I see elsewhere. So not in the legal space, but elsewhere. And as I said, it was frustrating because we were using all the latest technology, but we hadn't communicated or they didn't know the benefits it was bringing. So we hadn't explained that. So we'd failed, I guess, to demonstrate, why we were using the latest technology, but it clearly wasn't enough. So these four areas really grated on me for a few months, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But I did know that the tide was turning in terms of how our clients were consuming legal services. And I came across a report issued by BDO, the International Accountants, Service 2020, and it was written in 2010, and they had gone and researched hundreds of clients and interviewed a number of people within those businesses at different levels. And the broad question was, what do you think is going to contribute to good service, good client customer service in 2020, 10 years later? It came up with all these mega trends. And one of the mega trends related to technology, and it really resonated with me just given what I'd just done with my client base and the research I got. And effectively it said, paraphrasing, technology will be an enabler, not your people, not your results, not your brand, but the technology that sits under all of that to deliver all of those elements. And that had a sharp and direct, synergy with what my own clients were telling me they were wanting from me or needing from me. And it really left me confused in terms of what do we do. It became plainly clear I could do nothing. And I genuinely started to research around the globe to see, well, is there something out there from a technology standpoint that might be able to help me tackle these 4 areas? And I couldn't find anything. On a train to see my uncle over in Derby, I was reading that report from BDO for the third time, trying to find something. And as corny as this might sound, it was literally a light bulb moment when, and it literally went through my mind like this. I could build an app because I can get the data out of the case management system, which I'd coded. I could send updates. I could get real-time feedback in terms of service. I could send documents. I could produce a bit within the app which explained the whole process. We could actually link where they are in the process and tell them you're at this stage, but then educate them on what was coming next. And we could create a platform which effectively was self-service. And I started scribbling furiously, got to my stop, jumped off, sat on the platform for another 20 minutes, keeping my uncle waiting in the car park whilst I finished scribbling all my notes. And by the end of it, I had a blueprint of what to do. And really, inCase was born on that day. 3 months later, I'm pushing it out to my clients. And I guess that was the start of me embracing technology and certainly legal tech.
It's a fascinating story, especially the kind of the start of this. And I wanted to just dig into a couple of these things because there's lots of really important bits of information that you've just delivered, and I'll just kind of bring some of this together that would actually is very, very beneficial to people. What I find really interesting is that at the start you talked about the importance of your own sort of, I guess, values and principles, really, which is about people and customers, your own people inside your organization. If you take care of them, they're going to take care of the customers. If they take care of the customers, deliver a great service, the customers ultimately take care of the business. What a great way to run an organization. And as you said, symbiotic as it is, that ultimately is what's driven success. But actually, in doing that, you've created a forum to be able to listen to customers, and they're at the core. You're a very customer centric organization as a law firm, as you are as now a technology company. And I think that's very, very important for people watching and listening to this to really, really understand. Solving real world problems is about having the customer at the core, not about looking at your organization's processes and thinking, how do we make that better? You have to do that. But if you put the customer at the core and then reverse that, that ultimately drives out what the challenges really are. And I think that was one of the key things that kind of stands out in that story. But the other thing for me is these kind of 4 points that you mentioned about speed, information, education, and technology. And ultimately, that had come from a set of changing behaviors. Consumers' behaviors had changed. And if you didn't have that customer-centric view, you wouldn't necessarily have seen those changing behaviors and been able to connect the dots to say, hey, hang on a second, quite rightly, the world is changing. And whilst within our profession, we've got state-of-the-art technology, we've got good systems, and we've got good procedures and processes, the reality is that if you are focused just on your industry sector and not looking outside of it to learn lessons from elsewhere, you're not able to influence and innovate and enhance. And with that, I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit more, because, what you have done is innovative. inCase is, very innovative and market leading and changing. But, from that initial conceptual stage phase at that train station in Derby, how did you go from there to sort of starting to then innovate and getting something to market? Because that's no small step, and for many probably is quite a scary step.
Yeah, I guess looking back, I think it probably is quite a big step, and I can see how it might be scary. I think the first step I took actually was I just started to have some conversations with people. I'm a big believer in the fact that not many people, if anybody, knows it all, and I know for absolute certainty that I would not be, let alone my businesses, where they are without all the people that have helped contribute, whether they be current employees, past employees, advisors, non-execs, whoever. There's so many people that have helped contribute to the success of inCase and everything else that comes with it. But it came down to just starting to have a crystal clear vision. And you're right, at the heart of this was my clients, were my customers, and it was about reminding myself what am I trying to achieve here? This isn't about saying I've built a mobile app. It wasn't about getting that badge, if that's the right way of putting it. It was about reminding myself, why am I doing this? What's the objective here? What am I trying to do? Ultimately, I was trying to empower my clients to be able to give them the information they were craving and demanding from me and my people anyway, but do it in a way which was beneficial, more efficient for everyone involved. So that, again, we kept this win-win situation going.
Yeah.
And it literally started with having some conversations around, how do you build a mobile app? What's involved? Interestingly, I actually knew, because I'd trained and been on courses on our internal case management system, or the equivalent of a CRM system. I knew how to manage that and get information out of it, and that was already happening, but it was being delivered effectively by email. So I knew how to use that platform to a certain degree. I had to learn a lot more in those first few months because we now needed to do it in a different way. So the gap that I had was the concept of building a mobile app. I had no clue, and it just meant having some conversations. And I was on a 9-month leadership program, and just by fate or fluke, one of my colleagues was a software developer running his own business, and I had a chat with him about it, and then he started to tell me what was what, and started to give me the information and the knowledge to bring this to life. And before we knew it, I was able to convince him, I guess, to build me inCase version 1, which if you look back now, it's archaic, but get that MVP. And again, I think that was really important, recognizing that I had all these great ideas to do all of this, and that was all in that notebook on that train journey. But I was very aware that I wasn't going to be able to do, or shouldn't do, all of that in one go. There was another important moment when I decided, well, what's critical to the key objectives here? Those 4 key areas. Let's deliver on speed. Let's deliver on clarity of information. Let's deliver on education, and the technology bit will be the app. So it was just holding myself accountable to making sure we touched each of those 4 areas, and not trying to do it all in one go. And because nobody had anything like this, this was nobody was doing what I was doing, because I couldn't buy it. That's why I had to build it. So I didn't know if it was going to work. And it was a case of, just trying to hit the right spot for my clients, but get on with it. My clients were very receptive. I just asked them a load of questions. I got a load of answers. If I did nothing, my clients might start to think, well, what was the point in that? And I think that was probably another reason why it took off so quickly with my clients, because that survey took place end of 2011. By summer 2012, they had an app in their hands.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things in there that are quite important. One is the importance of that MVP, that minimum viable product, not making it too big, solving one problem or just a couple of issues, and getting it out there into the market, understanding how people understanding the reception of that, how people receive it, is it any good, and then iterating from there onwards. I think the other thing is as well is just to get going. I think sometimes there can be people overcomplicate unnecessarily, and I think there's an important message there to kind of push on and get going with things. Fast forwarding from that early phase, you've got a mobile app out there to your customer base. You've then decided, well, hang on, if this is working so well for my customers, I'm going to take this to market, and actually create this into a product, as a software as a service solution to take to market. What were the, looking back 9 years, 10 years, what are the big sort of lessons that you took from those early days, going from that sort of single application inside of Acquisition Legal all the way through to inCase now being an application serving many law firms and dealing with many cases on a day-by-day basis?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I think the biggest one was asking prospective customers, what did they think? Asking for that brutal honesty. So showing them what I'd done with my firm and walking them through that, and explaining to them how I saw this working in the industry and why I thought it would work. Trying to educate them, which has been one of the biggest challenges in the legal space generally around technology, is the education of what is technology. Where does it fit? I think there's still a lot of businesses in the space that haven't fully embraced it yet, because they're just not quite sure how it fits within their own businesses, which is a very real challenge for them. So that this education piece was really important, and recognizing that it wasn't going to be something that would just take overnight in the marketplace. As I said, nobody was doing it. So again, you're dealing with an industry here that is risk averse. I'm a lawyer. I can say this. I'm trained to be risk averse. My job as a lawyer is to assimilate all the information, put it in a coherent way in front of my client, tell them their options, and tell them what I think is the best option for them, which is generally speaking going to be the lowest risk option, but with the biggest outcome. So you've then got people like me running law firms who have got that embedded into their psyche. And then when it comes to business and taking risk, all of those traits as a lawyer come out and they come to the fore. And as you know, Chris, in business, there is an element of having to be smart with risk and obviously mitigate it. But, risks are prevalent in business, and you need to be bold and brave to take them. So, I think the biggest lesson was not underestimating that this wasn't going to be easy. I mean, nobody's setting up a business. It has it easy. That's very rare. And it was no different for my law firm. But I knew this was going to be even harder. So getting out there, speaking to colleagues within the sector, asking just for that, that absolute brutal honesty. What would you want? Again, these are now my potential customers. I've got a good feeling what their clients, my clients, were wanting, because I've proven that. But trying now to understand, well, what did they want from it? What would meet their requirements? And that I very quickly realized I had actually, in that I was going to have two customers now. I was going to have one, which was the law firms, and I was going to have another, which were their clients, even though I had no direct access. But they both need to get something out of this.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'd like to turn to the legal sector as a whole and its adoption of technology. And it's fair to say that the legal space has been slow. Certainly, if we look at that sort of diffusion of innovation sort of theory, they're definitely in that kind of, respectfully, in that laggard space of being slow to adopt technology. What do you see as being the blocker to that? Has it been that educational piece? And even as we fast forward now, having gone through COVID, and so many industries have had to accelerate, including the legal space. What else is blocking it, and what can law firms or people in that legal space do, legal tech do, to help sort of accelerate that to move things forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think it probably starts with having a really open mind. Over the years, I've seen the industry as a whole gradually embrace technology as something which can not just improve the sector as a whole, but actually improve the client journey, the customer experience. And you will struggle to find a lawyer or a solicitor that doesn't have customer service right at the top of their agenda. It is one of the common areas from one lawyer to another, regardless of what space in the legal sector they ply their trade. And with that, I think comes a willingness for those individuals, for those firms, to be open to how technology is going to help move that relationship on. Because I'm not sure that the sector as a whole has totally accepted that consumers evolve just in the way that they engage amongst us, how they consume legal services, how they want to consume legal services. And it's not that how they evolve with consuming legal services in isolation. It goes back to my point earlier. However they consume any service has changed. And you'd be ignorant to think that they won't expect or demand to have a similar kind of experience in legal. Then it comes back to educating the industry. And as I alluded to before, we're trained to be risk averse. And that's no criticism, far from it. That makes us really good at what we do as lawyers. And this is about recognizing that when we as lawyers running law firms, we need to remind ourselves that in that role, with that hat, we need to step away from being the lawyer. We need to be the business owner, and we need to think about what is going to support the future of this business, what is going to give us the ability to continue to impress our customers, but equally, what is going to do to impress our people. Again, there is a wave of people coming into the legal space that are expecting parts of their role to involve some sort of element of technology. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are, to a certain extent, disappointed that they're not seeing the kind of evolution that they might have experienced or be aware of in other spaces when their friends coming out of uni are going to other sectors where technology is wholeheartedly embraced and is moving at breakneck speed.
Well, it's interesting because you talked again there about the importance of the customer being at the centre of this, understanding that in other areas of consumers' lives, technology is pervasive, and what it's done is it's increased their expectation in other areas. For example, you used it earlier, Amazon of the world, the delivery. At any given moment, using our mobile phone, we can get access to information and get things that we need instantaneously. And even banking. So services that are in highly regulated environments, which equally are very risk averse, have now come on a long way. So I think it's important for people to recognize that, look, whatever sector you're in, whether it's highly regulated, there's lots of governance and compliance, you've got to find ways to which to leverage technology. And a phrase that you used early in this conversation was actually to see technology from the BDO report as an enabler. And I think that's a really key message, that, look, technology should enable you to do better things, to be able to service clients better, to be able to deliver a higher quality of service, to enable you to provide your teams with better tooling so that they can provide that service. And in return, again, comes back to your sort of opening statement about your sort of values and principles to approach in your businesses, is that means that those organizations, the customers will serve them much better, and therefore they become more efficient, more profitable, and enable, it is an ecosystem, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I think one other point I probably should have mentioned earlier. I've got this theory, and I speak to people about it a lot, and I see a lot of nodding heads. That I believe that in the morning there will be a point early in any person's routine where they will spend a handful of committed minutes every morning embarking on what I call their app routine. And that will consist of going through a number of apps in the same chronological order that they do every day to consume information that they need to get on with the rest of their day. And I have this. As I say, I speak to others. I know they have this. I will have a look at their bank accounts. I will then have a look at email. I'll then have a look at WhatsApp. I'll then have a look at sports app. And in those 3 or 4 minutes, I would have consumed loads of information, but in silo, because I can do that now through mobile apps. It allows me to segment what I need at that moment in time, and I can get the information, and get out really fast. That's a lot harder to do in 3 or 4 minutes in other environments where the information is sometimes pooled, and you have to go and find your bit around your finance. You have to go and find a bit around sport. This allows you to jump into that mindset for whatever purpose, but really quickly get what you need, get out. And again, this goes back to standing in the shoes of, as a law firm, our clients, or as any business, our consumers, and understanding, well, why wouldn't they want that from my business? Of course they would. If they want to get something, they're going to jump in. They want to get an answer really quick, and they want to get out, and they'll never bother you because they can self-serve.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I was one of those nodding people. Definitely,
Yeah.
we all do have a routine. It reminds me, and I'm going to recommend this to the people listening and watching this. There was a report by the Solicitors Regulation Authority back in 2021. I won't dig into it now, but there's some very interesting statistics in here, and the points that you've just raised, hopefully will help people take some action, because in one of those it said that 31% of the people that were surveyed in this report said that the adoption of technology wasn't a strategic priority. Yeah, what you've just described is hopefully an indicator to say, look, this absolutely should be a strategic priority, because if you're not in, if you can't be in that pattern routine at the start of somebody's day, and you can't envisage a consumer wanting to be able to access your information on demand to service their needs that they're trying to get from you, then, well, you are potentially sleepwalking your way into irrelevance. Because if you don't take action, that, that ultimately is what's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I remember that report coming out. I contributed to. I remember speaking to some of the professors at the University of Oxford, and we spent quite some time with, when I was wearing one hat as a lawyer and the other hat as a provider of technology into the space. And you're right, Chris. I mean, technology, if that's the right word, but that needs to be on the agenda of quite frankly every business, but probably more so legal, because it will take time for that to get embedded into the infrastructure, into the DNA of the business. As much as every law firm will have somebody responsible for compliance.
Yeah.
It's a heavily regulated sector, as you know. So there will be somebody that will be responsible for compliance. My belief is there needs to be somebody in every law firm that is responsible for technology. And that can be pretty broad. That can be maintenance and overseeing the systems that already exist. Most law firms will have some form of technology, even if it's as basic as Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Word, the Office package. But even that needs maintenance and updating to make sure it's fit for purpose. Having somebody totally responsible for the aspects of technology that are influencing how the law firm is doing its business and delivering on its services will give that issue a platform. It will allow it to be on the agenda when strategic meetings are being raised. It'd be interesting to maybe find out, survey how many law firms on their partners meetings or their monthly board meetings have an agenda item that talks about technology.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be many.
Well, and this brings me to my final sort of comments and final questions to you, really, and it's actually about ways of working. What you've just described there is the importance of a functional role, IT. But what you've also described subliminally there actually is also the importance of cross-functional capabilities, because it's all well and good to have, the compliance and governance area and somebody in tech, if you will. But you've got to have those people communicating and talking, because that's how we solve problems, because we've got to remove those silos. Businesses today are much more matrix in their makeup than they are of a silo operation. And that sort of brings me to that, my sort of last question, really. And how important is agility and those ways of working when it comes to, I guess, transforming as a firm, and really sort of moving yourself from a legal firm that's underpinned by tech to a technology company that's delivering legal services?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely one for the future. I think this is a real topic of debate, as you kind of phrased it there. A law firm using tech as opposed to a technology company delivering legal services. That's certainly coming. I mean, there are organisations out there that are already doing this on a pretty volume scale, but they're just not necessarily front and centre. And you're right, having the lines of communication open internally in order to understand how technology can help a business meet objectives in other parts of the business. There are ways and means. They need to be debated and discussed. If you take, arguably, these are two opposite ends of the spectrum. If you take the technology element and then the compliance element, people will struggle to say, well, how do they interact? But they absolutely can, and I know they can because.
And there are lessons from other industries in that as well.
Right.
Look at banking and how they've had to do it.
Exactly, and that's how I know they can. And there are firms now. There are clients of inCase that are doing exactly that. It's not that they're not cutting corners. Far from it. They're actually using technology to make sure that the human error is eradicated. And I'm not saying this means you remove all human contact. Again, there's a balance to be found between embracing technology in any business and using that to replace human contact. I think there's certain areas of human intervention which can be and should be replaced by technology, and there are other areas that needn't and shouldn't. And it's about finding the right balance. And again, it comes back to the communication within the business or the law firm. They need to understand, well, what are we looking to do with technology? What's the objectives? How far do we want to go? Do we want to become a technology company that is handling 20,000 clients but only 10 people in the business? Unheard of back in my day. Or do we want to allow the technology to handle 30,000 customers with 500 people, but to just be more efficient in our existing delivery of services? So we're not going to move away from our core. And I think that really scares law firms as well. Lots of firms have been around for a very long time. They have a DNA which they're incredibly proud of. They should be very proud of that. They've gone through all sorts to get to where they are today, and they will have grown, some will have shrunk, and some will have stayed the same. But they have a way of working and a culture which they don't want to undermine. Technology is not about eradicating that. It is about building upon that infrastructure. Those solid foundations, need to continue to be built upon. And if not for the sake of the business, for the sake of the people coming in, there will be a situation in some businesses where people coming in will say, if you're not going to embrace tech in this business, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can work, because it is embraced. Because I've been brought up on tech. The first thing, my youngest could open my iPhone before she could speak. She just knew. She didn't know what the numbers were, but she knew how to do that, and she could find her games folder and play the educational games. I just used to give her the phone. Bad parenting, I know, but I'm trying to prove a point. They have grown up in that environment, and if they then don't see that when they're working, they will just feel frustrated. I could do a better job if we did something with technology. I don't care what it is. If we just did something, I could be better at my job. And firms will have a challenge there with cultivating their own people if they don't really start to think about where tech can play a part. It doesn't need to be massive. It can start small. Like I said, like I did, you just start with something small and let it grow naturally. There will be people in the business that will gravitate to it and say, I can make what we've got a bit better. And over time, it will really revolutionize the business without sacrificing its culture.
Brilliant. Such as ever, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate the time. I know you're a very, very busy man. So once again, thanks for joining us.
Oh, I've loved every minute of it. Thanks very much, Chris, for having me.
You're welcome.